There's still so much we don't know about COVID-19, and new research now shows that just talking in a confined space could be enough to spread it from person to person. Jennifer Bellamy is looking into the new information and what you should consider as the country looks for ways to get back to normal, J. Bell.
Yeah, we hear a lot about those tiny droplets in the air that can lead to someone contracting COVID-19. But new research shows we should be thinking more about our everyday activities and how those droplets could be spread as we go about our daily lives.
Just holding a conversation could be enough to spread COVID-19. That's the finding of a new study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences and reported in USA Today. Scientists use lasers to show that 1 minute of talking loudly can produce 1,000 virus-containing droplets that can linger in the air for more than 8 minutes. That research found that since droplets that exist in an asymptomatic person's mouth can carry coronavirus, there's a substantial probability that normal speaking causes airborne virus transmission in confined environments. Some argue this supports the importance of wearing a mask as recommended by the CDC to stop the spread. Aaron Bromage, a biology professor at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, recently published a blog post that went viral. In it, he outlined high-risk environments that could lead to coronavirus infections. That includes workplaces, public transport, social gatherings, restaurants, and a person's home. All indoors with people in close spaces that involve a large amount of talking, singing, or yelling.
Bromage says as we continue to reopen and venture out into indoor spaces, we should consider if a location has good airflow that's being regularly circulated. And if it's a noisy or crowded spot, it might be a place that you want to avoid or not stay long inside.